Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devin Dagger, and joining me from all the way in Utah, ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for Mr. C. John Sarowik.
What is this character you're playing? I need to know.
I was
I
trying
cannot
to
come with you on
redo
this
my
journey.
Vampire of Chicago from 2 years ago, but it really wasn't that. I don't know what it was. It was sort of like, it was sort of podcaster Rod Sterling. It was Pod Sterling.
Pod Sterling. Got it.
Submitted for your approval.
It honestly sounded a little like Femme Fatale. Also mixed a little bit with Johnny Carson.
I don't know. I like Pod Sterling. That I think if I listen back, I could probably learn the character and do him again. But I'm in a good mood. I'm in a very good mood right now as we record this show about everything. But again, you're Siege and Sarowik. You haven't really given your proper intro.
Yeah, no, this is Siegen Sarwick. Thanks for that, Ted. Good handoff.
It's not like we're
Handoff
running
to nowhere.
running the thing. Well, I'm very excited. I'm just gonna run. I'm gonna go. River City Girls is a game that I have mixed feelings about.
Yeah, man. We've discussed some of them off mic, but we definitely need to kind of put them out there because they're quite legit.
Yes, they are. But before I go into these legitimate feelings, Dale and I played through it on co-op mode. And one of the biggest issues that I have with PlayStation 4 is if you're playing couch co-op, you have to log in on an account to the second controller. You could just be a guest. But if there are like multiple accounts on the PlayStation, you could log into your account.
Right.
But it doesn't unlock trophies for anyone except for player one.
That is weird. What is the point of making you log into another account then? I guess I kind of just assumed that was happening.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. So Dale and I played through co-op and got to the point where I have thoughts and theories that I'd love to use my podcast as a platform to share. But the problem is, because of what those thoughts were, Dale said, I'm getting this goddamn platinum. Which means, despite the way that we feel, we are currently playing through the game a second time.
Okay, all right.
And I just came from, Dale got home around 8:30. We record at 9 o'clock Eastern time on Monday nights. A little bit behind. Oh, hi, how you doing? Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. And I'm like, so we have half an hour. Let's see if we can like just get some progress in the game. Because both of us are kind of ready to be done with it at this
For
point.
sure.
But again, I get it. And she was
A
kind
sign
enough,
of things to come. Ooh.
But yeah, she was kind enough to play through co-op with me, so I agreed to do it. Especially because there's a little trophy exploit in order to get some of the stupider trophies, like beat the game on hard or beat the game as a second character, as a secret character. That we want to make sure we get the trophies the way that like you can scum them. Scum seems like a dirty word. But, you know, if you beat the final boss and it's set to hard mode, you get that trophy.
Okay.
And that feels like the kind of thing that will be patched out sooner rather than later.
You think? All right.
Maybe. I don't know. Way Forward is one of those weird ones that sometimes they like the little exploits in there.
They embrace the weird. They embrace the odd stuff that can happen in their games.
Right.
For sure.
But we want to make sure that we don't miss out on it. Because as fun as this game is on normal mode, hard mode just feels like it's a gimmicky hard mode. It's one of those things where it's hard mode because you can't get health refills from bad guys. Like, that's what hero mode is in a lot of the Zelda games, is just enemies will never drop hearts. Yeah. And that's just like, but that's part of the game. Like, that's been part of Zelda from day one. I'm not a hero because you've taken that away from me.
Yeah, like you've removed key parts of the game to make this harder, and that's not. Yeah, I can. I'm curious if anybody out there is playing Borderlands on what they call normal mode. I don't know what you set our game.
We were playing on normal mode.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it didn't feel like it was. Maybe it was because it was three of us playing, but I started a character of my own. Spoilers for what we'll probably talk about in a few minutes here. But like I started normal. I started a character of my own and specifically didn't choose normal. I chose easy because I just want to I want to see what the game is. And then I'll ratchet up as I go because you know me, I'll end up playing this game for the next decade. So
I mean, don't feel bad about that. Dale and I started two characters on easy as well, with
yeah,
the intention to play through and experience the story, so we could jump back into our normal playthrough with you.
yeah.
So
So
yeah,
like exactly the same thought. Also, I wanted to check out Flack. So and I am in love. But anyway, so I was curious what the differences were because to be fair, I've only played up to level 5, about 3 hours or so of of gameplay. Pretty much exactly half of what we did as a 3 the other day, and it didn't feel too much more one way or the other. It didn't feel like it was any easier because I put it on easy mode, but it also didn't feel like it was any harder because I was playing by myself. So it struck a nice balance for me. And so I was just curious if anybody out there has been playing on their own on normal and what that might feel like. So it's interesting that you bring this conversation of like levels and stuff into it because another game that came out the last couple of weeks was Darksiders 3 came out as a free download for PS Plus, and I very distinctly did not choose one of the harder difficulties on that game and am like breezing through it in a way that I thought was natural, but come to find out that game is apparently a Dark Souls like, and like it does not feel like that for me. So I almost started to wonder if I was maybe playing it wrong because I wasn't playing it on the harder difficulties. I don't know. It's weird. I've been having a lot of thoughts though about that idea of like difficulty level and on the fly changing and stuff like that. And it's weird to hear you bring it up organically, separate from anything I've been thinking about.
well, yeah, well, it's one of those things where I started playing hard mode. I had lost my job. I got laid off from the travel agency that I worked at. This is before I went to go work on the sea. And so what I did in that time, I was getting unemployment and I had the job lined up to go work for Carnival. So I really wasn't in any rush, right? Like it was sort of like my last spring break ever. And I played a bunch of video games, and it's when I got all my nasty trophy hunter tendencies were from that like 3 week time period that I didn't have a job.
Right.
I actually ended up taking the job as a census taker just because I'm like, I can't keep doing this. I need to be doing something besides playing video games. Of course, had I been streaming it, who knows where we'd be right now. La la la. But yeah, it was God of War 3 came out right as I lost my job, and a friend came over and I was going to play it, and he's like, why wouldn't you play it on hard mode? You've beaten the other two to death. Like, you got 100% in those other two. There's no reason for you not to play this one on hard mode. And I did that. And seeing that, like, it kind of pushed back in a way that games haven't ever really done for me since, like, the NES era.
Yeah.
It made me be like, well, I should start playing on hard mode. But then I started noticing what makes a game a hard mode. And if I can figure out from like looking at the DNA that it's just, oh, less health drops, or enemies hit harder and take more damage to kill, where it's like, well, this doesn't feel like the balance of the game. This feels like a way to like artificially inflate this game, and that's not fun. Where like if it's a hard mode, like Mega Man is a really good example. Hard mode just plays like Mega Man when I was a kid, where like normal mode gives you like little platforms for some of the tougher jumps.
Yeah.
Or like
well,
you
Mega
don't
Man
have
had the
knockback.
benefit though
Yeah.
of having room to work backwards. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes,
like
exactly.
it started in a hard mode and got to go back.
Right. But it's one of those interesting things where, you know, just experiencing what is a hard mode.
Right.
And like of course I played the first Zelda game that I ever played that had a hard mode was Link Between Worlds, because after you beat it, you unlocked hero mode for that one, and then finding out that it's just, oh yeah, no, you don't have health drops. I'm like, well, that's not fun. That's not what the game is.
Right.
And you
For
know,
sure. I think what we've seen evolve out of that is New Game Plus, right? Like it seems like the natural evolution of hard mode, especially like you mentioned with Link Between Worlds, or sorry, Link's Awakening. What were you just
it was
talking
Link
about?
Between Worlds. Link Between Worlds.
Yeah. Okay. I
Yeah.
thought that's what
But
you-
Link's
yeah.
Awakening is also going to have that hero mode, and
Yeah.
it has been confirmed that it will be the exact same type of hero mode as
Right.
Link Between Worlds, which
Well,
is
so
really got
like
my mind thinking on that.
the unlockable heavier difficulty, right? Like I mean Diablo famously has that sort of stuff shit too, right? Like it's not hard to find that kind of thing out there. So I think what that has turned into slowly but surely is into that new game plus mode, which I think when done right can be kind of phenomenal. You know, things that I think do work in that context are like, all right, all enemies are elemental in some way. Now you have to really think about the ways that you're hitting them, right? Take the stuff that you learned by the end of the game and let's start applying that from day one. I think is a good first step in making like a hard mode or a new game plus worth it for me personally.
Right. Exactly. I think that New Game Plus is good because you don't feel like you're starting from scratch again. Like going and saying that you have your whole like
Mhm.
toy chest to work with is
Right.
fun, especially because it you approach things differently knowing what you know later on in the game. It works. It really does work. And yet we're just avoiding talking about River City Girls at this point, and I'm happy about that, but I do want to get it off of my chest. So
Yeah.
we're playing through it again, and I'm amped up because we thought that we were just gonna like do some like needless little like there's stupid like little fetch quest things in the game that don't bother me, but they have to be completed before you unlock actual story content again.
Yeah.
So sort of those moments in like the Spider-Man PS4 game where it's like, why don't you swing around the city and see what you can find? And like you
Yeah,
have to
it's
complete a mission before.
it's becoming something that it's born out of RPGs. Grand Theft Auto uses it a lot too, and things like that. Like, oh, you need to have this much respect in order to do this story mission. So like, go out and beat up a few hookers for a while. Like it's born out of that RPG thing where sometimes you just got to spend some time in the world. Go fucking grind
We
for
built
fucking
this
farm
world,
points or whatever.
enjoy it.
Right. Well, but it forces you out into the world in a way that I've never been happy with. So seeing that in a River City Ransom game is just weird to me. And
Well,
yeah,
especially like River City Ransom, I think it's a 6-minute speed run, the original game, because you can just run everywhere, and if
yeah.
you have like perfect RNG, River City
Take
Girls
this.
obviously a step up from that,
Yeah, but
but
cyclical bullshit. River City Ransom, one of the big inspirations for the Grand Theft Auto series, and now stealing something back from them.
yeah. So everything cannibalizes everything else. That's video games. But
So
yeah,
true.
so we're like, all right, so we know that there's the mission where you have to destroy the fancy cars from downtown. Maybe we can complete that, and then we won't have to do that. And then the next time we jump in, we do the level 4 story, and you know, we'll feel like we made some progress. We ended up completing all of chapter 4 in the like 20 minutes that we played before we recorded. So I will say this: the second time through, I'm knowing where I have to go. The game is flowing a lot better. And also, at the end of the game, like we talked about, I learned that any consumable item, like specifically food, because you get
Right.
like bandages and stuff, and they don't do anything. But any food that you eat gives you a first time stat bonus. So even though we are far lower levels at this point in the game than we were the first time we went through it, we're much stronger because we've been buying and eating everything that we can,
Yeah.
knowing that your level is just an arbitrary number. And like what's worse, it's that issue, and it's an issue that I feel with Borderlands 3 as well. And
I
it's
was
a
just
small
about
one.
I was about to bring this up. Go ahead. Go.
It scales, like levels scale. So you
Right.
never feel like you're like super buff or stronger than everything because everything it just like balances out to what your level is.
Yeah, I will say that the thing that counters that in the Borderlands games, and to be fair, this isn't something I've experienced much in Borderlands 3 yet, but that's because I've only put like 10 hours into what will inevitably be a 300-hour game for me, right? But anyway, is going back in after going back to like areas that you've been to before. It's something that you and I did not do a lot of with Borderlands 2, but like for instance, going and killing a bunch of side quests, which is what I've been doing with my character from Borderlands 2. Now that we've moved on to 3, is I'll jump into 2 from time to time and go back and just like knock out a couple of old quests because I gotta get to them trophies. But anyway, going back with the character to old areas, that once that level is set for that area, it's pretty well set, unless you either new game plus it, or if you're going back for a specific like goal in that area. Like if it's to go kill a mini boss in that area, they'll upscale that mini boss and his minions, but they won't upscale things on the way. So you definitely do start to feel OP eventually. It's one of my favorite parts of that game, but they do a good job of burying that in a way where unless you go looking for it, it's not going to be in your face. And I feel like a lot of gamers, not necessarily you and me, I feel like a lot of gamers really like that. Like that sense that the game never feels like they never feel like they've outpowered the game. Overpowered is one thing, but to outpower the game is no fun. Right?
I mean, I personally enjoy it, but it comes from the fact that I like starting from nothing and then, becoming the king.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Like
breaking it is the eventual last step, right? Like as Bane once told us, like it's not enough to defeat him.
Knowing that like drinking the milk made me stronger and faster. Yeah, that's awesome. So like my stats, it's cool. I like that mechanic, learning it again. So again, I'm happy that I'm playing it through a second time because I'm picking up little nuances that I wouldn't have gotten the first time. And now here come the spoilers for River City Girls, like the real spoilers.
Yeah.
And that is the fact that the one thing I am not looking forward to in this second playthrough is the end of the game.
Yeah.
Where it is revealed that I'm going to do a dramatic reading of the theme song of the game right now because it's an exposition theme song. So it should tell you everything that you need to know if you've never played the game. We're gonna fight you with all our might to get back our boyfriends. We love them, so we'll take the world on and sing this dope song. Don't mess with us. We're the River City Girls. So what does that tell you about the game, Sejin? Like, what do you think the main goal is?
That you play as these two women whose boyfriends have been kidnapped, and it's your responsibility, nay, pleasure, to go out and defeat all of the assholes in River City to get your boyfriends back.
Yep. So that's it. And every time you start the game up, that song plays. And it's one of those songs that really gets you jacked up. Mm-hmm. It's like, I can't think of like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. More foreshadowing for later in this episode, is the best example. Because you hear that theme song, you're like, motherfucking, it's turtle time.
Well, especially in that arcade game, man.
Yeah.
Like any of them. Like, you start listening to that music when you're, like, on the character select screen, and you get excited to play that game.
Right. So that's what amps you up for River City Girls. So you go through this whole game, and, you're following the clues to try to figure out who would have taken, Kunio and Ricky, your boyfriends. And you come up against some people, and I'm going to save it till afterwards. You beat the final person, who is a Yakuza crime leader, and it's just like, you beat them, and you kick them out of their building, and they land in the sauna next door, where it is revealed your boyfriends Kunio and Ricky have just been all day. They've been taking a spa day. So they were not kidnapped.
Yep.
They just went to the spa. And that's fine, and that's funny, because, like, now, after beating up everybody, they're going to beat up them for making them worry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Standard
right.
Wilma Flintstone is mad at Fred for trying to be in two places at once. Fred gets hit with a frying pan.
Excellent. I'm going to put a quick pin in this to point out that already we're in sticky territory. This is not the worst storyline in the world for female protagonists, but it sure as hell is not a creative or really deep one, right? So, like, we're already in some pretty muddy waters. I just want that to be out there, that I am aware and clear of this before we get to the next part.
Right. Oh, well, I mean, I'm pretty sure that in order to, like, relate it, I took a page right out of history. So... So that's the thing. But throughout the game, right, and I'm saving a little bit. There's a little soup san at the end. Yeah. You come up against these two characters named Mame and Hasabe. Now, right. Mame and Hasabe are the Japanese names of Kunio and Ricky's girlfriends from the Japanese series.
It's a funny joke. You use their names.
Right. So instead of what Roxy and Cindy, I believe their names were in River City Ransom, they used their Japanese names. And every time you come up against them, they're like, get out of our way, we need to go save our boyfriends. And these two characters, and they're the kind of characters who, like, their design very much makes them look like they smell like soup and are maybe a little bit sweaty.
What does that even mean? I love it. It is so evocative. I'm right there with you. I can't picture it, but I also can't not picture it.
Right. This is the reason why I used the language I used. So you never trust them. And because you're in this role of Kunio and Misako, not Kunio, Kyoko and Misako, who in the Super Nintendo River City Ransom game that never came out in America are not only their girlfriends, but playable badass characters. You're thinking that, like, these two girls are just a bygone memory of the original River City Ransom game. So, like, it's a funny joke because we're referencing the fact that the continuity is all screwy. Because the Japanese people who made these games, Technos, they didn't care. They were just making beat-em-up games. Right. And then somewhere along the way, fans, like, got hyper invested in this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So you play through, you find your boyfriends, and you're like, oh, you guys are okay, you're just at the spot. And they're like, oh, it's those two weird girls who follow us around. Hey, you want to go see if Mama and Hasabe are available tonight? So it turns out you're not actually their girlfriends.
Yeah.
The two girls who look like they smell like soup are really their girlfriends. And it just kind of is a punch to the gut. And again, like I just said, maybe it's like laughing at those people who take this stuff hyper seriously. But the entire game and narrative up to that point has told and sold you on the fact that Kyoko and Misako are their girlfriends, and that is why they are the heroes and protagonists of this game, rescuing their kidnapped boyfriends.
I'm gonna say something that's kind of smart, and then something that's not as smart.
Okay.
But the first thing is in terms of the kind of smart thing, I'm already losing it. But in a weird way, like the joke that you just made about how maybe it's like a representation of like the fandom and all that sort of weird stuff. Like there is like a weird sense to the genre, I guess, is what I'm really thinking about for like River City Ransom and the way that it feeds into that grindhousey like feel, right? And so like the idea that these girls are also quote unquote psycho, like I hesitated to use that word, but that's definitely the word that would have been on the movie poster in the 1970s outside of the shit theater, right? Like that's
what you call Bridget Fonda in Single White Female, which is essentially what this becomes in the end. Right.
So like in a weird way, it's like it kind of fits neatly into that genre. And then the not so great defense, neither one of them is a great defense, but the even more not great defense is it wouldn't be River City if there wasn't a controversy, right? Like they like you're talking about a franchise that has never sat well with people, right? With the people that really kind of break this kind of bullshit down. You know, they didn't have podcasts in 1992 or whatever, but like you better believe that if they did at the time, people who sat down, played the game, enjoyed it, but still had some thoughts about it, would have something to say about that game. Like it has been a topic of discussion, shall we say, for 25 years now, right? More than that, man.
89 it first came out in America, so it's 30 years ago.
Yeah, so like so in a weird way, it also feels kind of nostalgic to me that like something's not sitting right with this game, and like that's not an excuse in any fashion, but maybe it's a reason. I don't know, man.
Right, like I'm trying to in the second playthrough understand what the joke was, but I just keep coming back to How I Met Your Mother syndrome, which is this is going to end with Ted asking his children if it's all right for him to pursue a relationship with their Aunt Robin now that their mother is dead. And it was very much probably in the Way Forward writing room. So at the end of the game, they're not really their girlfriends.
Right.
So
Weird
That's
that
just where we need
Bob
to end.
Saget has that conversation in Full House as well. Anyway, it just occurred to me. Been watching a lot of Full House lately. That's a whole other podcast. Full House fan cast coming out, by the way. Anyway,
Oh, exciting! As long as you focus on the fact that Jesse's last name changes from the first to second season, I'm in there.
we will talk about that, but we'll really talk about how Jodie Sweetin is really the glue of that show. Everybody thinks it's Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen.
Oh no,
but
it's Jodie Sweetin. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, man. So it's you're not wrong. Like the How I Met Your Mother thing. Like it's that build to a disappointment. I don't know, man. So much of me is making me think if this game was built for replay value. You know what I mean? Like one of the sweet things about beat 'em ups, is it's the only genre that you can really point to that like people still will go back to a game. You know what I mean? Like people love those arcade classics so much. Look at the story of the Simpsons game. That the second they started coming out outside of arcades and you could just play them, people fall in love with that shit, and then they never put them down.
That's true. I mean, if I see a Simpsons arcade game, I'm putting a quarter in. Ditto X-Men. Like,
right.
It's a real nostalgia there.
And it's an easy one to get your friends and family that maybe aren't into it to still kind of put up with for a little bit. Like, it's almost like the next step below that is fighting games. But, man, play fucking Soul Calibur against anybody that's been in love with that game for more than a year, and you don't want to play after 2 fights. Like,
I'm
fuck
sorry
that
I kicked your ass in Soul Calibur. That's what I'm going to say. Here, officially.
But there's this thing about beat 'em ups where they've got the same fan base as a fighting game, but the joy to a good beat 'em up is that you can also have your best friend sit on the couch with you who maybe doesn't even play video games, and you just say to them, slam this button and just punch dudes in the face. It's fine. We got this. Like there's like I don't want to say that they're easy or simple, because it's not that. Like it's that they're easy to grasp, at least.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to pick them up. There's also a real camaraderie in it, in the fact that you are working towards a common goal, and most, but not all, you can't hurt each other. So it's not like, say, New Super Mario Brothers Wii, where it turns into, I'm going to jump off your head. I'm going to throw you over this thing. Because you can't do
even
that.
If you're not hurting each other, like you're like, oh, I can't move. I like you're fucking me up because I'm falling down this hole because you're moving forward too fast, or like, hey, I can't make this jump like you can. Give me 2 seconds to make it. That shit doesn't exist in a beat 'em up. Just like press right, dude. You're fine.
Right, and it's also you bring up a really good point in that the only games that my mother would play with me when I was very young, like I'm talking 4 or 5, was beat 'em ups. Mm-hmm. Because, they're relatively short. It doesn't strain her eyes the way that the other games did, because they're measured, right? They're deliberately paced, to use a phrase that I take from cinema and apply it to video games.
I mean, it's a perfect phrase for it, though. Like the screen doesn't move until you beat up everybody the game intends you to beat up. The end.
Right. And, it's a fairly static image while you're beating people up. Mm-hmm. So, and I wondered that same thing about replayability if, they wanted it to be usual suspects. You go back through, you play River City Girls again. It does have a New Game Plus mode, which we haven't touched because we'd rather, loiter, which is what they say, to just go back to your current game and rack up all the other trophy stuff we're missing there. Because there's like a bad guy Pokedex that you need to fill for one of the trophies. And that has been frustrating and fun all at once, doing that with Dale in her game.
And her need to collect them all? Yeah.
No, not just her need to collect them all. In the fact that now we know that we do need to collect them all. Like, we thought that, you just need to catch one of each character type. No. You need to catch the girl with green hair, yellow hair, orange hair, and purple hair. You need to get one of every color in order to catch all of the bad guys. And then they all have like a leader who wears red.
Yeah.
And you need to that's my biggest complaint about the game, outside of the ending being a freaking bait and switch that is not supported by the narrative, which is the unfortunate thing that I'm learning in my second playthrough. There's
the
nothing
current
really
culture.
that. What was that?
Or the current culture. It's not supported really in any way. I don't know where they thought.
Yeah. No, but it's one of those things where I'm like, oh, but it's interesting when you go back and watch Usual Suspects, you see Kevin Spacey's eyes moving around the room and build the story in that first scene. Spoilers for that movie. I hate people who spoil that movie. Kind of spoilers. I don't know. Let's move past it. It doesn't. The narrative of River City Girls does not support the ending.
Right.
There's one line where you fight a Bobo, a cameo from the Double Dragon series, where he's like, maybe they weren't really kidnapped. And that's it. That's like the only allusion to.
Yeah, in a weird way, I wonder if it, again, harkening back to what these games used to be, like, not many people ever got to the end of these games, especially if you go back to arcade. Like people just didn't have the quarters to pump into it. They didn't have the skill to continue. You know what I mean? So, like, endings were rarely seen. It was a prize when somebody could see an end screen, right? Like, and so in a weird way, it's almost as if like it's like it's a secret that's meant for only people that finish the game. But now that we're talking about a console version, sit at home, like people are going to see the end of this game,
right? And there is a secondary, like, true boss where you do fight the two soup girls, which is what I'm going to call them from now on. And the thing that changes is there's an interaction beforehand where they're like, you're only their girlfriends in one 16-bit game that didn't even see a US release. So it's like, we know that you might have been upset, but like, there's your explanation if you didn't know the series.
Yeah, that sucks, man.
I mean, I still love the game. I am enjoying playing it. I am skipping most of the cutscenes because they now mean nothing to me.
Yeah, this is why Devin doesn't get invested in narrative, because it always lets you down.
Wow.
Video games.
Look at that. Origins. Video game and Origins. But I mean, I do recommend it. The last question I have, and I'd like to hear your take on it, is my Twitter feed has been full of fan art for this game.
Right.
And it occurred to me today that these people who are drawing fan art of the game probably didn't finish it. Because that's just how it feels.
Because they're not referencing the ultimate twist of that game.
And they're just like, or their comments about the characters, like, I love the design of this character. I love that she's like such a badass. It's like, so you really haven't had the rug pulled out from under you. I mean, how it feels when you talk about the character.
So it's interesting because what you're talking about is, does the end product justify the means, essentially, right? And so one of the biggest examples of this is actually Lysistrata in theater, right? Consider the story of Lysistrata. It's about these women that decide to take over a town because they're not happy about the way that men are running it. I'm completely dumbing this down, by the way. But anyway, this is not just for you, Dev. You forget we have an audience sometimes.
No, I understand. You're not dumbing it down near as much as Spike Lee did in Chi-Raq. Continue.
Oh, man. Anyway, so, man, that hurt. And I'm not even Spike Lee. So essentially, women take over the town because they're not that happy with the way that men are running it, right? And the entire thing is this idea of the women become the negotiators, they become the leaders, they end up running things. It becomes almost a utopia. And we learn that, like, hey, like, women have a good sense of how to do this. Maybe we should treat women fairly and give them the ability to be in charge of things and all that, right? Except everybody seems to forget that the end of that the end of that play is everything going right back to normal. The men come to terms with the fact that they should treat women better. The women say, yes, you have learned your lesson. And then they hand the reins back over to men, right? It is considered one of the first feminist plays. It is written about very frequently as a feminist play. It is refilmed by famous film directors as if it is a feminist tale, right? But nobody seems to address the fact that by the end of that play, nothing has truly changed. And it is something that is, now, if you are a nerd and dive deep into like the academic side of things, like, I'm sure you'll find one or two people that are arguing that, right? But it's not the narrative in the zeitgeist. It's not the narrative in amongst the colloquial people that like see and read that play, right? So we have an instance of everybody just kind of ignoring the ending to talk about like the meat and potatoes of what the rest of the play is. And really, what is an ending but the last like 10 minutes? Right? If you really sit down for a 3 hour play, are you really going to talk about just the last 10 minutes at the end of it? Is that the only part in which you can pull things out of? No, there is the rest of it, right? The thing is it's that conversation of like, does the ending matter? Now, as I pointed out earlier, used to be a time when people didn't really get to the end of games. And even nowadays, so many people are playing so many different games all the time that there's a lot of people that don't get to the end of games. Is that bad? I mean, in this particular case, like you're pointing out, it does kind of mean that they're not understanding an essential part of the characters.
Right. But it's an
But is that
essential
their
part of the
fault?
characters that, like, I personally am trying to ignore. But
Uh-huh.
it always creeps in there. And at that moment where, like, oh, hey, remember this part, though? I just feel so betrayed again.
How
And
would you feel if you hadn't finished the game? Like, do you almost wish you hadn't finished the game?
no, because that's not how I do it. Like, that's not how I play
Fair enough.
games. I
Fair
get
enough.
I play games to see the ending. And it's just, but I can also point to movies where, like, I can enjoy up until the point where it ends and say, well, this was a good movie, but you guys kind of botched the ending. It's why I was such a fan of, like, Booksmart and Good Boys this year, because really strong narratives that then also stuck the landing.
Yeah.
And it's like, because there are so many times where, like, you tell this really, really good story, and then your ending doesn't. Scott Pilgrim, ironic, because this game, River City Girls, feels more like a continuation of the Scott Pilgrim video game in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
That came out and
Scott
cannot
Pilgrim,
be
which
played
also
on.
features a problematic female character that is in love with the main male and weirdly, I think this River City Girls game is more influenced by Scott Pilgrim than we realize, but yeah.
Yes. I have never been satisfied with the ending of the Scott Pilgrim story, except for in the video game where, I mean, because Scott Pilgrim, if you don't know the story of Scott Pilgrim, basically he wants to date this girl and he needs to defeat her 7 evil exes before he, like, is proven worthy, kind of, but he kind of puts that construct on. Like, she just says, I have these evil exes, you should know that.
She spends the entire story trying to stop him. We should
Right,
be fair
right,
to
that's
that
what I'm saying.
character.
Like, yeah,
She's like,
she
don't
brings
do
up the
this.
fact that I have this past, and his reaction to that her having this past is, well, I need to defeat that past to prove that I'm better than it in a lot of ways. Like, Scott Pilgrim is a problematic character. I don't think anyone would disagree with that characterization of him. And in the video game, where you're literally playing a manga or a movie that is a video game as a video game, the ending is hyper video gamed up, where it is revealed that every female that he has ever interacted with is in love with him, and they create a harem so that they can all be together. Like, and that's the only satisfying ending for me, because it just feels like as ridiculous as all of the narrative leading up to it.
Yeah.
Where the ending of, like, Edgar Wright's film, and the fact that both versions exist, where it's like, oh, I guess, like, even though you ignored everything I told you about, like, I don't want you to fight these guys, it kind of turned me on that you did, and now we can be together and happy.
I don't know. I feel like there's a very will they won't they still feeling to the
Yes,
end
no,
of it.
that's why I tried to raise my voice at the end.
Yeah, yeah,
With that question
for
mark.
sure. Though, like I said, I think this game is much more informed by Scott Pilgrim than I think we realized before. But like the more that we talk about this, the more that I could definitely see everything that they're pulling from.
Yeah, and especially since Way Forward built that Scott Pilgrim game in 2010, I understand that it like, it's actually helping me sort of deal with my feelings about the game in a way that I wasn't necessarily prepared for. But again, it's just, even though I don't like how Scott Pilgrim ends, I still read it like once a year, and I still watch the movie every time. I just know that I personally am not satisfied by the ending. And that's
Right.
okay. That can happen. I can still celebrate the rest of it. We need to go back to Lysistrata and the fact that you glossed over the main crux of it. And it's that women get their power by withholding sex.
Yes, that is all. That is part of it. Yeah, they get their power by withholding sex from the men, and I said, they end up getting handed the keys to the kingdom because of it. Yeah,
right. But I think also, because now we're talking about Lysistrata, that's what happens when your two podcast hosts have theater degrees. There's this really interesting part about that story where the women are just as upset about the fact that they're not getting any as the men.
Right.
And I think that is what, for me, and whatever, this might be dangerous territory I'm marching into, truly makes it a feminist piece. Because it's like, no, we don't just have power over men. Women can also want to have sex. Like, it is true equality on an issue that, like, up until, like, God, the 60s in America, we didn't believe that women wanted to have sex. Like, it was taboo for a woman to want to be a sexual being.
It literally took a time period that we have dubbed the sexual revolution for this country to get over its like issues with sex, and I say that knowing full well we haven't. But
right.
yeah,
that's what I'm saying. It's like, there's the reason why I look at Lysistrata as like important literature, and only because Lysistrata got brought up on this episode do I want to make sure that, I give Chi-Raq a hard time, but mostly because, like you said, it sort of loses the thread. But then Lysistrata does that anyway, so maybe Spike Lee is a genius. Maybe.
Look, man, like that's the thing about all of this, right? Is at the end of the day, it comes down to the way that you really kind of want to view this stuff. And like sitting there and thinking about all this stuff with the characters and the way that these people are treated is fantastic. And I love all of that. It also is so nested, though, in a nostalgic like genre and attitude. And none of this, by the way, is me trying to give it a pass for the mistakes that it makes. It's just like, I guess I'm not surprised that it becomes that at the end, or as surprised as you seem to be, because because they couldn't seem to get their fucking head out of the sand. And I mean, let's talk about Way Forward for a second. We've been talking about them as if they're some ethereal group, but we've talked about Way Forward on this show.
In fact, I think our very first
episode. And in that episode, we talked about the issues that they seem to have with things like sexism and sexuality and gender. Like they very much seem to be a company that is very much nested in this old way of thinking, which is great on the one hand because the games they produce are these nostalgic blasts from the past that like weren't true about blasts from the past, but damn, they feel like it. If you told me Shantae was a game from 1989, I'd believe you, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, in that same like conservative nostalgia that they have, they also find themselves in these really weird positions of like hypersexualizing female characters or like one-dimensional like female reads on characters and things like that. Like it's par for the course for them.
Yeah, that's yes, and that's the next logical step in discussing Way Forward. And we even went back because there is so much Double Dragon Neon in River City Girls. Have you played River City Girls? Have you played River City Girls? No, you haven't. Have you played Double Dragon Neon? Is that a game that came across here?
Yes.
Okay. So, like, the dojos where you learn moves are, owned and operated by the Dragon Brothers, Billy and Jimmy. And it is very much their characterization from Double Dragon Neon. Do I disagree with the fact that they're voiced by the Game Grumps? A little bit. Just a little bit. But then so does the whole internet. So like but that's not keeping me from playing the game the way that some other people are like, I'm never going to play this game because of that. And Skullmageddon, the final boss of Double Dragon Neon, he owns a shop. He owns the pawn shop in the game. So it's very interesting to see him show up as well. And all of that, Marianne also shows up, and she is far buffer than she was in Double Dragon Neon. She ain't going to get punched in the stomach and carried over her shoulder ever again. She has never skipped Ab Day, which I don't even know if Ab Day is a thing.
It can be. But like, it's funny that you mentioned the Game Grumps thing because I just wanted to say like Leonard Maltin was in Gremlins too. Get over it. Like critics do this stuff from time to time.
Yeah, but he's
It's
Leonard
not it's
Maltin
not
too.
clean, it's not pretty, and like they have no right to ever like criticize this game now. Like anything that they put out about it in a critique format should be questioned rightly. But like the same asshole, it's the Gamergate nonsense. It's the same assholes that feel like, oh, because this person has a relationship with a video game designer, they can't possibly be objective. And it's like, no, the world doesn't work like that. Like know what you need to know about your critics so that you understand where their information may be coming from, but you don't get to write somebody's opinion off just because of the life they lead. Anyway.
Exactly. No, you're right. But like, and that's partially why I bring it up too. It's like, yeah, like I have to give myself that little pause. But also, Game Grumps haven't played the game yet, and I don't know if they ever will. And that really speaks to what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
But because of all that, I got out my PS3 and said, Dale, we're gonna play through Double Dragon Neon because I want you to know that game. And she enjoyed the crap out of that game. But then also looking at that is the worst characterization of Billy and Jimmy that has ever existed. Like making them 80s, 90s bro douchebags.
Yeah. Which is just an excuse for them to do and say a lot of really weird, shitty stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Like butt nut and peanut feet. Like, it's like, what's happening?
You're right. Yeah.
So it is. So that's looking at a way forward game that does not have a primary female protagonist, but also I guess it's because it's dealing with nostalgia that like it's sort of difficult to separate the two.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. I mean, that game's still great to play, but I would have muted the voices if it meant I could still listen to the music.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Ooh, man.
Jeez. I had a lot of thoughts on this one. So Borderlands 3, you want to do a little bit? And then I have a beautiful story to end this on. So
yeah, of course. No, so Borderlands 3 was, so I'm trying to think of where to start. Well, okay, I'll start right here from the most simple point. I had a blast when we were playing the other day.
I had a blast too. And I'm going to be honest, there was part of me that like in the last hours before we started, that was a little hesitant to jump back into the Borderlands. And I was not alone. Dale was also like, I mean, I liked the second one enough, but like, am I ready to play this game again? So like, then as soon as it started up, I'm like, oh no, I'm back. This is a great game. It has aged magnificently. Yeah. The stuff that they did to bring it into modern gaming is tops.
Yeah, there's a couple of changes that I'm still coming to terms with. The idea that the badass point system has now been turned into some other nameless system that I don't have access to right now because they don't let you unlock that until after you finish the story mode, which I don't love because like one of the best things about Borderlands 2 was building up those badass points with one character and then deciding, all right, I want to try out an assassin. I've been playing a commando this whole time. Let me try out an assassin. And when you do, you're not starting from zero, even though you're starting at zero, right? Because you've got that badass point like leveled up enough where your hits are a little bit harder. You can take a little bit more damage, not much, but just enough to make it just a little bit. It doesn't feel like starting from the beginning again, right? And the fact that and I will say this because I then started a second character. I didn't know what to do with him at first when I started my flak because I wanted to start on normal because that's what we were playing on. But but honestly, the deciding factor for me for starting on easy was but I'm going to be starting from the beginning on my own. Like let me start on easy and you can change it at any time. So I'll up it if I need to. And then at no point did I feel the need to up it. I was like this is just fun. Like the second it starts being too easy, I might consider that. But yeah, anyway. So like that aspect kind of disappearing was a little disappointing. Still getting used to the new backpack system. I know you and I talked about it a little bit while we were playing, because it does do all of those things that you were hoping when we were playing too. But I think that's just a matter of I'm still new to the game. Again, I've put less than 10 hours into this game. So like give me some time to get used to the systems and I bet that issue will go away. That sort of stuff, you know?
Yeah, and I think what my hope is, now, there are definitely people who've beaten it, so I could go find out, but I'd rather keep myself in the dark, as it were. My hope is that once you complete the game with one person, that badass system or whatever it's going to be called does translate to all of your characters.
Oh, you think once it unlocks, it'll just unlock? That would make a lot more sense than what I think they are doing with it. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, because that would make, yeah, because like you said, because then it's an incentive to be like, all of the stuff you did with this character will give you that leg up to play through again. And that just feels more Borderlands-y to me in a way.
No, I mean, you want to talk about a game that makes you feel OP at some point. I mean, I bragged about it earlier, but like one of the best parts of going back in Borderlands 2 and even in Borderlands 1 was going into an area that you hadn't been in for like a month and then all of a sudden just owning everybody. But yeah, I think you're not wrong in the way that it has quote unquote aged nicely despite being a new game. But I think you were right. Like the idea that they've definitely learned some things. I mean, even down to the animation stuff, the fact that every psycho that you come up against now, no matter the size or shape, has kind of really unique like moves and features and stuff in a way that was not the case in Borderlands 2 and was definitely not the case in Borderlands 1. Even some of the more problematic villains that they had in 2 have been like tweaked and renamed in a way that they don't feel as problematic in 3. Still a little weird, but not as problematic.
Yeah, I was thinking about that exact thing. Like they took these, they understood that we're releasing this into a different cultural and sociological landscape. We want to make sure that we're not offending people and then going to say, well, it's how it was before. Like, yeah. It felt good. And like I said, I wanted the backpack to have the changes that they immediately implemented. Right. But I will also be the first person to complain about the fact that I no longer have quick swapping for the guns.
I mean, that being said, you hit triangle twice as opposed to once. So like,
yeah, but what about when I have 4 guns? Then I'm gonna hit triangle 3 times? No.
Yeah, I like I said, it's one of those things that when I have it, I love it. When I don't have it, I don't miss it. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the give and take, right? When you're doing these things, like, okay, we only have so many buttons on a controller, but these are things that people definitely want. Well, that does mean that you're going to have to get rid of a thing that maybe people didn't realize they love. And, oh, my God, you've taken this thing out and you've ruined the whole experience. Or, like, it's a hard balance. Like, I don't envy those kinds of choices having to be made, you know, and I think they made them well so far.
I point at that as sort of a joke, to be completely honest, because the fact that I can cycle through missions without pausing the game is exceptional. Yep. I like that they implemented the whole ping system from Apex Legends. I don't remember what down does.
I don't think we know yet. Maybe that'll be a thing that quick. I don't know. Who the fuck knows?
I think it does something. There's a lot of I don't remember, but
there's a lot of this game that we don't know yet. To be entirely
down
fair.
Switches the mode of your weapon. So down
right,
does
because
have a
if you've
thing.
got a double if you have a double moded weapon, which is also super cool. Like, yeah.
So like all of that, I would rather have quicker menu navigation with my arrow buttons. I guess that's what you call them, right? Than the like quick checking of the guns, because that's not a huge deal. Like you said, you just hit a button a couple of times and you're done. Right. It's just that as soon as I'm like, oh, this is excellent that I have all this, the back of my mind is like, yeah, but that means you're not going to have that other thing that you really liked, you idiot. And I'm like, why are you being so negative, back of my head?
Yeah, man. I don't know. Like, I can't help but feel like, I don't know. There was a lot of build up to this game and a lot of controversy before the game came out and things like that, and I was in a weird place where I was wondering, like, am I going to really play this one? Like, am I ready to go back to the Borderlands myself? Also, on top of that, am I ready to support a company that has a lot of issues right now? And I was just in such a weird place with the game myself, like Thursday night, Friday morning, right? But the second that we sat down and started playing, like, it was just fun. It was just fun.
Yeah, it all just became noise. Everything that was bothering me about the game, I'm like, it doesn't stop the fact that, like, Gearbox is a very problematic studio, but
I mean, we spent plenty of time.
It's an enjoyable game.
Yeah, I mean, we spent plenty of time booing Chris Hardwick when he came on screen, right? Like I have a hard time listening the claptrap still, because every time his voice comes out and it's not the original voice, like it hurts a little bit. Like there's some things going on that make it hard to ignore kind of the shittiness of that company. But privilege is a beautiful blinder sometimes, I guess. Like the idea that I can still sit back and just blow up some fools is nice. So it's this weird thing that we're gonna have to contend with, where like we don't love the way that artists portray themselves in everyday life, but it's the same thing that movies are going through right now. Like how many Tom Cruise movies come out every year and people still go to them and they still make bank, but man, that dude has got some serious issues in his life, in his personal life. Do we support that? Like, what do we do?
Yeah, it's that separation of church and state, separation of like work and self, I
Right.
guess. And that's actually what we were talking about with like the Gamergate stuff that you brought up, and this and all these other issues where like, and also just because you have an issue with like, I don't think either one of us is shying away from the fact that we booed Chris Hardwick as soon as he came on screen when we were playing Borderlands 3. That shouldn't take away the fact from these people who worked to build that game, because someone who is not even related to game development or like implementation of physics in the game decided, let's pick this guy who is like a pinnacle of nerd culture to be in the game.
Right.
Like their decisions, they're so far removed from each other, and it sucks to be like, oh, but I can't support it because of this one thing.
Oh, it's even doubly far removed because he's only playing a character that he played in a Telltale game that had come out before he had been revealed to be the skis-ball that he is. And like, so at the time when he was hired by Telltale to be in their game, it was revelatory to have him play a character in one of their games because of what an icon he was. You know what I mean? It's the same thing like we talked about when going back to the Michael Jackson episode of The Simpsons. Like, do you ignore that thing? Because at the time he was such a key part of culture that like, of course he played a voice on The Simpsons. And to just ignore that now is weird, right?
Not only did he play a voice on The Simpsons, his people got in touch with Matt Groening and said, Michael would like to be in an episode of your show.
Right. 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 So like it hits this point where like at the time this was the way that it was, and so it's a piece of history, and it becomes that argument of just like, well, do we topple it or do we preserve it? Because we kind of need to keep an eye on it. We can't let history repeat itself, but at the same time, I don't love that I have to sit there and listen to Chris Hardwick for the first 10 hours of that game.
Here's a weird thing, semi-related to the sort of, it's not really cancel culture that we're discussing, but it could very easily mutate into this discussion. Cheers is a show that I love, and another show that I love is Designing Women, and I've been going through it recently. Designing Women, I just got to the 5th season, and there are so many jokes in Designing Women about our current president, Donald Trump. And every single time one of them happens, it feels a little weird. Considering, how liberal the Thomasons were when they were creating Designing Women and everything that they stood for. And also in terms of like, they make a lot of Bill Cosby jokes as well because it was the zeitgeist at the time. Right. And you're not going to feel, and it's like, I'm not going to stop watching the show because of that. But then I look at a show like Cheers, and I think the reason why it will have like a firmer stance in the like discussion of popular culture is because they were smart enough to create XBs of those characters. Not necessarily Bill Cosby. Like, they just kind of shied away from it for whatever reason. I think it's because Cosby was on a different network, or they followed Cosby. So, like, we don't want to be referencing the show that was just on before us.
Right.
But, Evan Drake and Robin Reese's character, Robin Colcord, they're both supposed to be Donald Trump-esque characters. And the fact that, like, I think there's one reference to Donald Trump in all of Cheers, and I am not even halfway through Designing Women, and, like, it's every 3 episodes they might make a reference to him,
Yeah.
And it makes sense, though, because they're business women and they're talking about things like the art of the deal or can you believe how he decorated that place? Like, it's all natural and organic, but knowing what we now know and who and what Donald Trump would eventually become, it's just weird.
Yeah. No, man. It it is gonna be that way for a while. I imagine it feels a lot like back in the day when people were looking at President Reagan and thinking like, I saw that asshole in a shitty sci-fi movie like not 3 years ago. But you know, it's definitely going to be something that we're going to continue to kind of grapple with. It's weird. It's so weird to deal with the way that we know our celebrities nowadays. I guess that's the thing that I'm starting to really come to terms with is like I know that we've gotten closer and closer and closer to celebrities with things like Twitter and Facebook and things like that, and also TMZ culture has blown up in the last 20 years. Like paparazzi was always a thing, but the way that we have access to the paparazzi and all that is insane now, right? So the more that we get to know about people, the more that we're gonna get to see that they're people. They don't get to be icons anymore, right?
Yeah. It's strange. And now, if you'll indulge me, something happy. Something that, like, unabashedly is an exciting story. So, I took off work on Friday to play Borderlands 3, knowing full well that we were going to just dedicate the day to playing that game for as long as we could.
Right.
And then Dale took off Saturday, because she usually works Saturdays, so that we could do a day where we did not play any video games at all. And go on an old-fashioned Decker adventure, just like driving around. But we didn't have a plan. So our only plan was to get breakfast, and then we decided, let's go out into the world and see what happens. Now, Granite State, New Hampshire, they were having a Comic-Con.
Oh.
And the Ninja Turtles creators were there. Now, I've met some and, forged semi-relationships with some of those guys. So it was like, hey, let's head up there, right? Like maybe we got tickets for it. We see what happens. What we ended up finding out was this was the first year that Granite State Comic-Con had partnered with local breweries to create comic and Ninja Turtle themed beers and alcohol.
Damn.
So it was like, do we go to a comic convention and, buy a ticket and have this whole thing? Or do we try to go to all these breweries and try these special beers?
Wait, they didn't have the special beers and the liquor at the Comic-Con?
So they were being served. The Comic-Con was taking place at the Hilton in Manchester, New Hampshire, and the on-site bar had them on draft. But they also had them at the tasting rooms of the breweries. So we decided, all right, well, we could go to the thing, but also all of the literature that we had found in them said that these would be very popular. It will be limited stock. So it was this thing where, like, we didn't decide we were heading up there till, like, 1 in the afternoon. So it was like, oh, do we want to, like, try going to the convention where I'm sure people with too much money in their pockets have already kicked the kegs of these special beers? Or do we want to, like, go on a mini brewery tour to try to taste them that way?
Oh, yeah.
So we decided to do that. And we wound up at Ancient Fire, which is actually a mead and winery. Because they had done 2 specialty meads for the event. One called Ancient Ooze that was citrusy flavored and had a lovely green tint, for the turtles.
Mead sounds right for the turtles. I have to say, I'm very pleased with this so far.
Yeah. And they also did another one called What's Your Midichlorian Count? That was a cherry lime mead. And so we get there and this place is dead because we're nowhere near the Hilton. And It's one of those things where, the comic floor was open until 6:00. and the tasting room is open until 7. So you're not going to be leaving Comic-Con to go over to this place. So it seemed like the smarter thing to do. And also, they had partnered so that we could also try the beers as well at this one tasting room. It ended up being the Shangri-La of the like Comic-Con themed alcohol.
That's amazing.
So we spent 3 hours there. We walked out with 2 growlers of the midichlorian count and the Ancient Ooze. We ended up kicking the keg of Ancient Ooze in buying a 64-ounce growler of it.
I am legitimately jealous of this story so far.
Yeah, well, that was the hope. And also, like, they were delicious, and we tried other stuff that they had on the menu. And my favorite thing is they were listening to, like, an 80s radio station. And I don't want to take this from Dale, but something that she has always wanted to have happened, which was everybody in that tap room singing along to I Will Survive at the top of their lungs.
That's awesome.
And then it happened again with Don't Stop Believing by Journey, like hours later. So our adventure was getting there was the real adventure. Because I was convinced if I followed Route 2 in Massachusetts, I would eventually come to like a road that ran right into the center of Manchester, New Hampshire. I was a little off. So I ended up adding an hour to our journey.
Oh, just a little.
Just a little bit. Well, here's the thing. And I was right about that. I just didn't realize that 202 Mass turned into 202 New Hampshire. So I passed 202 and just like kept going up Route 2 until I got to 63. And then we took 63 to 202. And I'm like, oh, so I'm an idiot. But we got to see some beautiful countryside, some like really nice mountains and streams. So like it was nice that it wasn't just we went to a brewery and drank all day. We
you took a Rhode Island spring break where you traveled more than an hour to go somewhere that you could have gotten to in less. But yeah I got you.
It was a good time. And I don't know. And the other thing is it was Cowetbunga. So it was a wheat beer that we ended up stopping at a liquor store. We stopped for gas heading home, and Dale's like, well, I'm going to go inside and get a water. And they had 4-packs of that available. So we bought 2 4-packs, and each of the cans is done up like one of the turtles. So like it was a beautiful like Saturday of like drinking in tap rooms that
turtles.
And turtles, yeah. So everything that I love all rolled into one day. So Borderlands with you was a wonderful Friday, alcohol on Saturday, and then I mostly slept on Sunday.
Hell of a weekend, my friend.
Hell of a
Congratulations.
Weekend. Yes, thank you. All right, so if you'd like to talk to me about River City Girls, nostalgia, or alcohol, feel free to find me on Twitter at Devin D. Decker.
And if you want to hit me up at Siege versus the World for any sweet advice on Borderlands 3 nonsense I can get into. It's the one thing I'm missing so far because I don't know the game well enough. I don't know where the silly shit is yet.
Did you get all the shift codes that IGN posted?
No.
So yeah, I'll send you that link. That'll happen. All right. So until next time, Will, put down your big fuzzy unicorn and bring these people home.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devin Decker and Stephen Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.